Hey everyone, welcome to Mailfuzz TV. I am Peter, and I decided to check out more of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. This episode is Graveyard Rats, so we'll get into it. This one's directed by Vincenzo Natali, who notably directed Cube. In fact, me and Tara on the Mailfuzz Movies channel just reviewed Cube on the Atomic Cinema Experiment a few weeks ago, so go check that out. But he went on to do other things like Splice and a couple other things, and nothing ever really quite reached the level that Cube did in terms of fame or popularity or anything like that. I think he did like a movie for Netflix a couple of years ago, based on a Stephen King story, the Tall Grass, something like that. And I wasn't super hot in that either, but I love Cube. Cube's great. So Natali gets like lots of chances from me just based on that one movie, even though I've not really been that into anything else he's made. So Graveyard Rats tells the story of a grave digger, or particularly a thief, a grave digger thief, who is played by David Hewlett, who was in Cube. Obviously, it's been a long time since Cube. It took me a second to clock who it was. I was like, he seems familiar. And this is, set in your kind of like gothic London times. So he's got the big sort of goofy mustache. He's got the bowler hat on and something like that. He looks very different. But I was like, wait, this guy seems familiar. And it turns out it's Hewlett from Cube, which is cool. So it's nice to see him and Natali have kept a working relationship all this time. But the premise of this episode is that he's a gravedigger who is introduced at the start of the episode because he scares off like two rookie like thieves who are trying to dig up a grave, and he scares them off, and it's kind of like a sort of like twist and turn reveal where it's like, no, he's also just a thief, he's just better at it, or at the very least he likes to think he's better at it. But not unlike the first episode of this show, it's a character who's not particularly likable. Obviously he's stealing from the dead, he's kind of nefarious, but he also has, much like the character in episode 1, he has money troubles. He owes some bad people money, and they're threatening him, when he takes his first batch of loot from the start of the episode to whoever he needs to pay. The guy's like, this doesn't even cover the interest of what you owe. And then that sets up more of the episode. But he's under threat of being killed because he owes money, just like the character in the first episode. So maybe there's a critique there that there's too many similarities between them. But like I said about Lot 36, this is a very Tales from the Crypt-esque story with an unlikable character who you presume is going to meet some kind of comeuppance by the end of the episode. He's not quite as unlikable as the character from the last episode, though, if only in the sense that he seems a bit more cowardly and less hateful. He's greedy and he takes shortcuts, but he's not like completely racist like the last guy was. So I mean, that's something at the very least. But he has moments throughout where it seems like maybe he's at least considering repenting for what he's done. Moments where he's like, if I promise to obey and take in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, blah blah blah, please help me through this, God, kind of thing. That said, though, it's a little bit cynical because he's still stealing as he does that. So ultimately he still deserves his comeuppance. But the episode's title comes from the fact that he blames the rats for why his loot has not been very good, because the rats are getting to the bodies first and taking everything, including the bodies themselves, before he's got a chance to pillage them. And the guy who's saying this doesn't really believe him. He's just like, get your money in or you're dead, kind of thing. But this sets up this fear he has of the rats, and it's a recurring motif throughout the episode when he's in his room, which I think either he's staying at a brothel or he's staying in a hotel that's used by a lot of prostitutes. But either way, there's kind of a comical scene where there's the couple next door are banging against the wall, and he's not even paying attention to it. He's just kind of ignoring it and doing whatever he does. But it leads to this sort of nightmare sequence where he believes all these rats are falling on him from the ceiling that's caving in, and he just imagines it. But it kind of sets up that he's got this fear of the rats, and they represent this impending thing that's going to take away from his his income. As silly as his income is, and as lewd and nasty as it is, he's scared of losing it because it's the thing he's fallen into. So before I explain what happens in the back half of the story, and kind of the main, you know, the main thrust of it as it goes on. I guess I should just sort of give my impressions of it. I thought it was okay. I didn't like it as much as the first episode. I actually think in some ways it set up its character a little bit better than the first episode. If only because there was a little bit of fun to be had with him going through his routine, going through his, you know, the actor I quite like. So when he's acting all kind of scared and he's begging for his life and he's blaming the rats, and this is how hard done by he is because the rats are getting in the way of his thieving. It's quite comical in a dark way that he's such a sniveling little coward. And then there's a scene early on where he goes to like the coroner's, and he's got a deal with a guy who works there. He doesn't really want to see him, but he's addicted to something that he gets for him, and lets him in to see the fresh bodies to see if they've got any gold teeth or anything that he can take, anything that he can pillage. And whilst he's there, the head coroner comes back with like the wife and son of like the main body that's there, and it's this rich guy who has died, and he's got a bunch of gold teeth, but he's also going to get buried with this like scepter, and he's getting buried with rings and things. And there's a great moment where they're sort of saying, no, my husband will have the best, he'll be buried with this and this. And it cuts to our main character, and he's got this grin, and we're sort of looking at him through this like a flask or a bottle that's in front of him, so his face is all kind of like distorted and kind of like put into kind of a big circle shape, and it's kind of widened and fattened, and it's like a fat grin. It's like he's getting fat with just the thought of the greed of him getting his hands on this gold. So that's a really nice little moment of direction, and I think it was a nice little moment of like setting up the character and just the lengths he's willing to go to and how sniveling he is. And despite the fact that you could maybe feel sympathy because he's scared and there's bad guys after him, it doesn't feel like he's just happy and excited about this because he's going to be able to pay off his debts. It kind of, it's a little bit of that Adam Sandler Uncut Gems kind of like, oh no, I can get more than that. I can come out on top on this. This is my big score kind of thing. He's got that addiction kind of quality to him. I think that is played fairly well throughout the episode, and especially the introduction of all these elements, I think, is fairly entertaining in and of itself. I think the episode falls down a little bit though, where he goes to the cemetery to go into this gravesite, go into the coffin. The body is not there, except you can just see the legs be pulled through the hole in the ground. The idea that the rats are pulling the body away, which is that, like, I didn't hate that. It was kind of comical and silly, but I'm okay with this having a lighthearted sense of humor to it. If we're going with the Tales from the Crypt tone, that's not outside the realm of what you just accept on that kind of thing. But it's it ends, a lot of the back chunk of the episode is him crawling through these tunnels under the ground that have been made by rats, and there's a reveal of like a mummy rat, a queen rat, who's like this huge, if you ever played Dark Souls or something like that, it's kind of like the rats in that game. It's the size of a big dog or like a pig or something like that, even a bit bigger than that. And so there's some running away from that. It's in his face screaming at him. There's something that's set up early on in the episode where there's like a secret black church, he calls it, underneath, which is like basically just a bunch of typical supernatural, like, superstition stuff where rituals might have been done and yada yada yada. It's actually something he says to scare the two rookie grave diggers at the start, the two thieves. He says it to them to scare them off, and then he ends up falling into this underground church while he's running away from the rat. He also gets caved in on at one point, and it generally looks all right. Like it's definitely got the style to it. It's very desaturated, but there's like blood at points that sort of sticks out and pops a little from the screen. Particularly when they're in the coroners, he's checking the different bodies. There's like a body that's been decapitated, and it looks almost black and white except the neck stump, which is quite red. So it's got like a feel to it. It's not necessarily a unique feel. Like, I've definitely seen other things set in this time period go for this similar kind of grayscale almost feel to it. I guess you're kind of almost paying homage to actual black and white movies at a certain point, even though it's not quite black and white, but it's kind of getting there. But yeah, and then the rat looks all right. Much like the Cthulhu looking head thing from the first episode, it looks not bad. But he gets into this area, and there's a bunch of skeletons here. Clearly a lot of bodies have fallen down here, or they were here in the church to begin with, and there's a lot of rings and stuff. And he thinks it's his day. He's excited. He's thrilled. He's picking up these rings and all these little random bits of jewelry, and he's super excited about it. And then he sees one on like a skeleton that's on the wall, and the necklace that this thing's wearing, this pendant, matches the pendant symbol on the big statue that's in the church. So obviously as a viewer I'm thinking, what, you didn't know, you idiot, this is like some supernatural heebie-jeebie stuff, don't touch that. This is going to curse you or something, what are you doing? But sure enough, his greed gets the better of him when he takes it, and this zombie or skeleton effectively comes to life almost instantly. And it's very Sam Raimi. It's a very kind of practical skeleton puppet, or animatronic or whatever, and it's chasing after him. And then there's some more chasing in the tunnels, and he ends up getting cornered by the rat and the skeleton, and he deliberately caves in part of the tunnel to cover the rat. Oh, actually, that makes me remember, I also glossed over the fact that he shoots one rat after he shoots himself in the foot, which was also pretty funny. He shoots a rat and the rat explodes, which I'm not sure how realistic that would be if he actually did shoot a rat with a handgun, but it did make me laugh, so I'm okay with it in the episode. I mean, ultimately a lot of this stuff, there's like fun moments in all this stuff, but I think it's almost hurt a little because it's the second episode that someone goes looking for something, they go into a secret area. In this case it's tunnels, and the last one it was a secret compartment behind the storage locker, and ultimately there's like a monster of some kind like waiting for them. And first it's the rat, and then it's kind of like a double header, because then you've also got the skeleton coming after him. And it's it's all right, but it kind of feels like it's a little bit too similar to the first episode, and probably not done quite as well, or not even done quite as well. I would say it almost just suffers a little bit compared to the first one, because fundamentally a Cthulhu-headed looking thing on a humanoid body is a bit more unique and cool than a giant rat and a skeleton, which are a bit more old hat. Like, I appreciate the blatant kind of like just fun it's trying to have with these concepts, but I definitely like the Cthulhu head thing last time more. But it's not terrible. Like, it's definitely still a very watchable anthology episode. The ending does feel very just kind of like the most obvious thing that they could do with it, which is he thinks he's getting out. He sees like a shine in the distance, thinking it's the sun, thinking that he's going to climb out of these tunnels, and it's just the metal inside the coffin. So he gets to inside the coffin, and he can't open it because someone's obviously closed it and buried, put the dirt back on, so he can't get out. And then the very final moment is the two young thieves from the start of the episode open up the coffin, and they're like, wait, it's this guy? And they're going to take the stuff around him, but then he starts having rats come out of his mouth, and the episode ends there. It scares them off, so maybe they'll actually have been scared out of this line of work, and this will have been an effective knock-on kind of thing for the spirits or whatever who are trying to dissuade people from stealing their stuff. So, I think it's got a fair bit of style. It looks generally quite good and consistent, and there's a couple of fun moments that made me chuckle, like the reveal of the giant rat, or the regular rat exploding when it gets shot. I think the performance from the main actor is relatively enjoyable. I think he puts a lot of energy into it. There's a lot of like cowardice and a lot of like stammering and trying to talk his way out of things, but he always feels like he's kind of like your days are numbered. You're clearly going to lose ultimately by the end of this. Almost to the point where you almost want to see him get a win at the end, just for the change, just for the difference. But it's a decent enough time. It's definitely not as good as Lot 36, but I wouldn't say it's terrible either. I think they were wise that this one's a bit shorter. This one's only like 35 minutes, and I think that's a good idea. I think try to stretch any of these out beyond what they clearly are built for is good. And if anything, you could have maybe shaved a couple of minutes off of him like crawling through tunnels towards the end, which did feel like it went on a little bit, just a touch on the long side. But for the most part, like I enjoyed the performance of the character enough that I was kind of entertained throughout. Particularly him getting excited when he heard that this guy was being buried with all this like expensive stuff. Was probably the most I get into the character throughout. So yeah, that's Graveyard Rats. That's episode 2 of Cabinet of Curiosities, and I do plan on doing more. I'm going to go look at episode 3 soon, and hopefully you enjoy hearing my thoughts on them. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. Appreciate it a lot if you do those things. And of course, if you want to support us financially, you can do that over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or hit the super thanks button on YouTube and help keep all the content coming. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?